And I'm always just like, dude, sell your ETH, buy Bitcoin, sell your ETH, buy Bitcoin. And he like kind of gets it, kind of listens. But this week with hitting all-time highs, he like reached out and was like, I'm going to do this with Bitcoin. And I finally get it. I'm going to sell my ETH. And I'm like, let's fucking go. And then of course, like a day later, now ETH is short-term pumping. And I'm like, this motherfucker's going to reach out to me and be like, dude, like I should have. And I'm like, I'd been like, bro, I have been telling you to sell and buy Bitcoin for years now. I am not letting this slight 6% spread impact how your decision-making plays into this. But anyways.
Maybe this is the pump though. Maybe this is the one time ETH takes back, you know? That's what they're always thinking in their head.
Dude, they're thinking F word, but I'm not gonna give that credit. And this is not an Ethereum or a crypto podcast. So I'm not even gonna give it the time of day. But the reason why I wanted to share that story is because we have Ted Thayer on the podcast today. Welcome to the Medium of Exchange podcast.
Great to be here.
Ted, you complete the trifecta of our guests because we have had two of your friends already on the podcast. Both of them you connected us with Daniel and Jordan. So it was only a matter of time until you yourself came onto the show and we just, dive into everything that you're working on. And I'm really excited to hear about your project Feed Filter, as well as your journey in Bitcoin and just how you ended up here building at Pleb Lab in Austin, Texas, the epicenter of Bitcoin in the world, in my opinion, and overall just talk about how you view things, because I feel like we always have pretty interesting and fun conversations. So with that, Ted, thanks for joining and welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here. It's a long time coming.
100%. Before we get into Feed Filter, I do want to just go take a step back and talk a little bit about your upbringing and where you came from, because we had a crazy connection this morning where we found out that our dads actually worked together back in Boston, for, I don't even know how many years. They were both at the same company for over 25 years. So there was probably a very good amount of overlap. So yeah, just give a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure.
And how you ended up here in Austin.
Yeah, that's quite the connection that we found there. But I guess you could say that, my dad's side of the family, at least, he goes all the way back in theory to Pilgrims. They were kind of an early wave, and you know how it goes. You sort of start with the pioneers, and the pioneers become the institutionalists. They build up their institutions. And obviously all of our institutions are very corrupted right now, but I do think that, we're building institutions here at Bitcoin Commons, at Pleb Lab. So there is great value in the institutions. And so I would say that my family that I grew up in is extremely rooted in that kind of world. So big banking institutions. My parents met at Harvard, so they're kind of immersed with nonprofits and that kind of world. My mom's side of the family is a little bit different. So she was born in Seattle, Washington. My grandfather, he was big into exploring and glaciers. He was one of the leading scientists on climate change, actually. So he just loved mountains, and he noticed the glaciers were melting and then kind of did some more investigation on that. Coming from that, or growing up in that world, you kind of see a lot of systems around you. And I guess I became fascinated with sort of hacking systems in different ways. And I was also a troublemaker. So I was always causing problems and, doing things that shouldn't be doing. In middle school, 5th grade, I believe, I was trying to create this crazy, worst business idea I've ever had was trying to sell pencil lead to other kids.
For mechanical pencils?
For regular pencils.
Oh, all right. Because for mechanical pencils, that actually could be a good business.
Right. Yeah, but I wasn't that smart.
But I mean, you're in 5th grade. Let's cut yourself some slack. But
well, then what I did is I graduated to fireworks, which actually was a very good business. And the way that works is basically I lived in Massachusetts, where fireworks were illegal, but I would go up to Maine, which goes through New Hampshire, where fireworks are legal.
Oh yeah.
I very quickly put 2 and 2 together, and I said, I just smuggle fireworks across jurisdictions and sell them out of my locker, and I'll make 50 cents on this firework or $2 on that firework. And I just thought it was kind of fun, right? And so I think that started me down a path of where I'm constantly looking at systems, trying to understand them. And I guess my natural instinct is is basically hacking the system. I mean, I don't think of it that way. I just think of it as kind of like fun, or it's like a game. You just understand the rules of the game, and then it's almost like a puzzle you solve where you try to weave your way through things. And I've made a lot of bad calls, and we all have. But I would say that's where I got my start, and then that kind of became an entrepreneurial drive as well that led me to other ventures.
Well, that's really cool. That's hilarious. How old were you smuggling?
Oh man, I think it was 7th grade.
7th grade. So you're like 13, 14 years old, just smuggling across state lines. That's very funny. But that's also, I feel like every entrepreneur has these stories of like, starting that, whether it's a lemonade stand or selling pencil lead or ultimately selling dynamite in the form of fireworks. There's always like those crumbs that lead to where you are now. And I mean, I think that family history is super interesting, like from the, Boston Pilgrim, like growing up in Massachusetts, everybody knows Plymouth Rock. And like, did you ever go to Plymouth Plantation?
I've never been to Plymouth Plantation, but I went to a really cool monument right on the arm of Cape Cod.
Okay.
At the hand. And I forget the name of that town. Provincetown?
Yep.
Yeah, Provincetown. And so they have a great monument there, which is it's like an etching of all of the Pilgrim settlements starting in 1634. Plymouth first, then Plimpton, which is the farm of Plymouth. And then there's like a pause where everyone's waiting to see if these guys made it, because 50% of them died right off the bat. And then it's like, I think around 1639, that's when people really started coming over, which is when my father's ancestors came over. So they kind of waited. They weren't the bleeding edge pioneers. They kind of waited until these guys made it, and then they followed in.
Sometimes it's not even necessarily like the first leader. It's the second person that comes in that really starts the movement. So, I mean, it takes just as much courage to be that second mover as it is to be the first. But, and by the way, Plymouth Plantation, like I was privileged to grow up going there as like my school field trips. So like I say privileged. It's hilarious because like Plymouth Plantation is just a LARP. Like it is Renaissance fair, but for pilgrims. It's awesome.
I want to go back there.
It's fun. It's fun. Just like you see people like churning butter wearing, like the buckle hats and whatever. I don't even remember where I was going with that.
That made me think of something, because one of the interesting things I think from growing up in this kind of area is you get exposed only, in a kind of a haphazard way to the things that turned America into what it is today. That kind of 1700s time period.
You really understand that history of the American Revolution, and like most people don't know about the Battle of Lexington and Concord, like the shot heard around the world, and like it's literally called the shot heard around the world. I think you brought it up last week.
Yeah,
because you were there. You were there for the anniversary, right?
Yeah, my parents, they moved to Concord in retirement, and so they're doing this big march for the 250th anniversary of this event. And one of the things that was really interesting is that all the different groups that participated on the side of the United States, I don't even know if it was the United States at that point. It would have been
the colonies.
The colonies, yeah. So the colonies, I guess in my head, I thought each colony would be like one unified group. But back then, it was so rural and so decentralized. It was actually each village had its own group, and they were coming up with their own colors sometimes on the spot just to participate in this battle.
That's crazy. And like, yeah, because the Revolutionary War is insane. Like I recommend studying it if you haven't gone deep into like, I mean, it's become kind of a meme, but like Massachusetts invented America, right? So you have this idea, and then you fast forward 250 years and you see where Massachusetts is now, and you're like, what is going on? What changed?
Happened?
And I think that goes back to what you were talking about around institutions. And I'm going to try to pull this all together here in like, when you say institutions and the Pilgrims were the pioneers, I view Bitcoiners as like the same way. I know we call ourselves plebs in a lot of instances as almost like a term of endearment of like, yeah, like we're just honest plebs, just hacking away, all that type of stuff. But at the same point, we're working on something that is at its core super like pro-freedom, and something that has not necessarily been accomplished at scale in humanity's history, right? So I think that's what's super interesting. But all that to say is you're currently working at Pleb Lab, and I love Pleb Lab. I love the guys at Pleb Lab. I got really introduced to what was the Commons and now Bitcoin Park Austin through Pleb Lab.
Is your business accepting a form of payment that stores value over time? A recent survey showed the number one challenge that small business owners are facing today is inflation. You raise prices, renegotiate with vendors, try to stay ahead, but your dollars keep losing purchasing power. At the Bitcoin Payments Advisor, we help business owners like you accept Bitcoin, a form of money that's built to resist inflation. Unlike dollars, Bitcoin has a fixed supply, and that means the value that you receive today has the potential to hold or grow over time, not quietly erode. Our service makes it simple. No servers and tech headaches, just easy setup, white glove support, integration with your existing systems. If you're ready to explore a smarter way to get paid, one that helps you fight inflation instead of fall behind, visit bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Again, that's Bitcoin Payments Advisor
Lab and helping out with Carr and some of the projects that he was working on. And that's where we met. So can you just like kind of give a overview of one, Pleb Lab, and two, like your thoughts on that pleb versus pioneer kind of framing of how I look at Bitcoiners and just like what we're ultimately working towards today.
Sure. Yeah. And I can try to tie it back to kind of the tail end of my story, like that led me to Pleb Lab too. Like a lot of people, like during COVID, I was sort of, I didn't know what to do with myself, really. I mean, I just thought the whole world was going to hell and I needed to get out. So, I was very excited about Bitcoin. So I decided, okay, I'm going to just go to every city that has Bitcoin events and just kind of meet the people and see what it's all about, right? Sold all my belongings. I had one backpack. And so I just started hopping cities. And each city I go to, I think I started with San Francisco. I asked, what's the next city that I should go to next? And in Seattle, they told me to come down to Austin. And then I went to Vancouver, and Vancouver said, you should go to Austin. So I was like, all right, I need to come to Austin.
Vancouver has a great Bitcoin scene.
They do, really good. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, it's kind of surprising. Some of the places you'd think would have an amazing scene, like Silicon Valley, doesn't really, to the degree that we have here. So anyways, I come through Austin, and the first event I came to in Austin, it was actually the Tuesday wine meetup in South Austin. But then I came to a Bitcoin Commons. I remember I was right here, and I was talking to someone. I said, hey, cool Bitcoin themed shirt. And he's like, oh, I made this shirt. I was like, oh, that's very cool. It's like a very pleb thing to say is I made this from scratch, right? Yeah. And then I was just talking to him. I had a feeling. I was like, you wouldn't, this is during COVID, so there wasn't very many computer parts that you could get. And I was trying to build a node. I had no node. And so I said, you wouldn't happen to know where I can get like an Arduino or Raspberry Pi? And he said, oh, turns out I'm actually running a shop out of this place called Pleb Lab.
Oh yeah.
And why don't you come on by and I can hook you up with some of these parts? He was charging above market rates, but that's because you couldn't get them on Amazon or any place online. So that was my first introduction to Pleb Lab. And so I got the parts, and then I'm sitting here with the, this Raspberry Pi, and I'm like, I kind of conceptualized this. I was going to make a node, but with a cool display that would show mempool.space on it. I hadn't really set up like a Linux operating system before, so I was kind of in over my head. And Austin over there, he helped me really. I mean, he donated a lot of time to help me set up this node, get it running. I think it took me 3 attempts where I just kind of wiped it and start over. The third attempt, I finally got this node pulled together. Since then, the mempool has become so clogged that it doesn't run. I had to upgrade the hardware.
Yeah.
But that was my first introduction to Pleb Lab, and it was just really a kind of a builder's environment. And I think that really is a commonality amongst a lot of plebs, a lot of Bitcoiners. Once you stack as hard as you can, you get rid of all your dollars and you get all in Bitcoin, then you're kind of like, well, now what? I mean, you keep working for your day job, but at some point you got to reconcile this new world we're building with the old world. And I know you're creating this podcast from scratch. You're very entrepreneurial. I think a lot of Bitcoiners are.
Well, and I think what's cool about Bitcoin is, to your point, you're in such a new white space that you see all these opportunities to build new things. And it's like, if not me, then who? So like you can sit around, but especially when it comes to, like this podcast, for example, or what you're building with Feed Filter, it's like, if you don't just do it and put it out and try to get feedback and try to iterate and see what works and see what sticks, then chances are either no one's going to do it, or you're going to miss out on a huge opportunity. Like it's one of those things of like, you've really got nothing to lose because you have nothing to lose. And that's what I love about Bitcoiners, of, being more action oriented people in like a world that continues to just be full of inaction. I mean, I think Dana White has like a quote about how, I forget if he's talking about his actual son or a hypothetical son, but he's basically like, he'd be a savage. He would just work and work, and he would be so successful because he wouldn't give anybody else a choice. And, that's kind of like the hustle culture stuff that I think a lot of people in the entrepreneurial world fall into, myself included. But it's also true if you could find the balance, because you start to see that you can move fast, maybe break things, but you can move fast, and other people are like, whoa, how'd you get this much done in 2 days or a week or a month? And then you look back at like a few months stacked over a few 100,000 blocks, and you're like, wow, I did a lot, and Bitcoin did a lot too, and that helped. And that helps as well, because you're saving in something that appreciates in purchasing power. But like, with that, I do want to so you talked about systems and how you're interested in like kind of hacking systems and all that type of stuff. And before we fully dive into Feed Filter, I do want to just like weave in your Bitcoin story. Like, where were you when you found out about Bitcoin? How did that help you decide to travel around the country to all these different nodes of meetups and figure it out? Because like, I mean, that's a really cool way to travel, of just going from Bitcoin meetup to Bitcoin meetup, because Bitcoin meetups are so unique in their own way. And being able to like go to a city and just find a local meetup is probably my favorite thing about Bitcoin, in like a very just transparent way, because it's how you get connected with all of the most like-minded people.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like in the Pilgrim times, they were just leaving one place and going to another. But in Bitcoin times, that's why it's so different and unique. You can go to any city and you can find Bitcoiners. I mean, not all places, but there's communities all over the place.
Everywhere.
And I mostly did, the United States, Canada, and Western Europe. So I didn't really extend. I mean, more recently I've gone to Asia. But one of the things I noticed is that it seems like they concentrate in some areas. But yeah, I guess going back to my stories, very interested in systems. And I was doing these ventures of different degrees of complexity or viability. I went into school for physics. I wanted to go into engineering. I liked technology. I ended up in space science, which was very intellectually cool, but I felt like I ended up working on these things that didn't matter. So I kind of had that call back to entrepreneurship as I was leaving college, and I did two ventures, two kind of real ventures. The first one totally failed. This was a children's book that I poured all of my money into and gave it 2 years, and it just didn't work out. And we made every mistake in the book you can pretty much make. And then the second venture, raised quite a bit of money, and on paper looks quite nice, but it never really cracked product market fit. And so I really gained an appreciation of doing customer discovery work early on and being very humble and taking feedback to make your product good enough that it deserves a customer to spend, let alone like whatever you're charging, but 1 penny. Even to use your product for free, a customer is incurring a cost. So I became very fixated on this idea of market research. The reason being is because when I, experienced startup failures in the past, I would kind of look back and say, okay, what are all the things that went wrong? And I probably overthought it, but I would try to reverse engineer it like any other system. And I kept finding that, product market fit, it's not the only thing that matters, but it's very core to the rest of the business, because that's right when you hand your customer a solution to a goal they're trying to accomplish, and they hand you money or time. So you really want to optimize that. And to the degree you can optimize that, that makes the rest of the business easier to execute. So in that time frame, after I'd done these startups, I was kind of like walking around like a wise man with scars on my back. And, I was sharing my experience with others, in vain, but at least I was going to hacker spaces. I was talking to people, and they would tell me about their product. I'd ask, well, what problem is this product solving? What's your customer research? Here's how I'd recommend you go about customer research. I'm sure most people didn't listen to me, but at least, it's kind of, I'm sure, there were some insights that were shared there.
I mean, just for my personal example, like when we first met and I was telling you about what I was starting to build, which like, I still think there's a place for that in the market, but you were asking me all these questions of what you were basically describing around like customer research and doing different like data set analyses. And I remember like nodding along being like, yeah. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, I've done none of that. Like I would go back and be like, all right, like how can I start to think
overwhelming a little bit, right?
I mean, no, it's not overwhelming, but it's the experience, right? So when you enter something and you think that it's going to be quote unquote easy, or you think that just because it's your idea that it's going to be successful, and then you start to actually like go under the hood and build it, you realize, oh, like I'm not everybody thinks the way that I do, but there probably is a kernel of gold in there that you can kind of hack away at. But just to give some real life example of like you being like, oh, have you thought about this, and this type of customer? And I was just like, oh no, I actually haven't. I have no evidence to back any of what I just set up.
And, it's like this balance of being like very critical of, yourself, your own idea, but also in a constructive way, in that kind of balance. And every entrepreneur struggles with that, because when you're trying to sell, you're kind of selling your vision. But then when you're improving your product, you need to be super critical, and going back and forth is difficult. But it was in one of these hacker spaces. That's when I encountered Bitcoin, really. I mean, I had heard about it a couple times before, never really took much interest in it. I kind of associated it with the dark web and, buying drugs. And so I didn't want to get involved in that. That was going to be a problem. So when I met someone in one of these hacker spaces who was an early Bitcoiner, I said, hey, can you explain Bitcoin to me? And like really explain it, because I'm reading the news articles, I'm reading the same news that everyone else has read, and it's not very helpful. It just says, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. Oh, that's not very helpful. What the hell is a cryptocurrency?
And what year was this?
This was 2017. So during the kind of bull run at the end of 2017.
That was around when I got into Bitcoin too. And like, I remember seeing an article on like CNBC and being hyped. Like finding news about Bitcoin at that time, like you were scraping Reddit. There were a few podcasts, but yeah, it was hard to separate the noise from the signal back then.
It really was. And you were better than me, because you actually took the initiative to get on Reddit. But I was just looking at the news articles and I was like, this is not helpful. But my friend, I don't know if you'd really call him an OG, but he's definitely pretty early. And he was extremely helpful, because he said, look, I can tell you about Bitcoin, but I'm going to need 1 hour of your time and a whiteboard. And so that was like a challenge to me. I was like, I'm open-minded. I'm willing to, because he thought he had so many people ask him about Bitcoin before. He was like, you don't actually want to know about Bitcoin. You just want the little, tidbit, the one-liner that you can take on. So I pulled up a chair. He pulled over a whiteboard. We're in a space just like this. And he explained SHA-256 hashing. I walked away. It was basically 1 hour. I walked away and I said, okay, Bitcoin is unhackable. I mean, I didn't fully understand, elliptic curves and cryptography, exactly like why that is unhackable. But, at least from a hashing standpoint, I understood that after that conversation. But then I was like, okay, so there's this thing, it's kind of like a money and it's unhackable. So that's the solution. That's the technology. That's a pretty cool technology, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing since sliced bread. So why exactly do people want unhackable money? And that was a question that I asked after that meeting. And that launched me down the rabbit hole you're talking about, which is, for me, it was several months of reading Austrian economics and monetary history, which, just really increased my conviction, or helped me build a conviction over that kind of 4 to 6 month period. This is 2018 as the price is going down. And my conviction was just going up.
That's bear market, time to build, time to learn. And that's what I find so interesting about Bitcoiners. And I've said this before, but just like all the, diverse backgrounds that Bitcoiners come from, like you from more of the like technical looking at it of, okay, this is unhackable, and then figuring out the what is money part, versus like myself, I looked at it from the what is money. Like somebody asked me once, what is money? And I equated that to the same idea of like, what is time? Where I was like, oh, it's a social construct, right? And it's kind of a joke, but like everybody accepts it for what it is, but it's also a real thing, but it's also kind of not. And asking that question, when I was 17 or 18 years old, I was like, oh, like maybe there is something here. Might as well get some in case it catches on, like for lack of a better reference. But then once you enter that rabbit hole and you start like being like, oh wait, so I was like, wait, what makes this thing secure? And this for me was more around 2020. Like from 2017 to 2020, I was kind of just a casual, like, I believe inflation is bad, and I believe Bitcoin is inflation resistant. Thus, Bitcoin is good.
Jack and I are so happy you're here. But here's the deal. We need your feedback. What do you like? What do you not like? Who do you want us to have on the show? In my businesses, anytime I suggest copy edits, I always say edits welcome. Guys, edits welcome. Please comment, and while you're at it, do us a favor and like and subscribe. It really helps out the show.
Then 2020 happened, locked us down. And I was like, okay, I'm actually going to understand why this thing works and why it's like unhackable, right? So I learned about how mining actually worked. I learned about what the difficulty adjustment was. And then I was like, oh my God, like I'm obsessed with this thing to the point where, I'm now in it full time.
Yeah.
And like, I preach about it in basically every conversation that I have, for better or worse. But it's just it's crazy because going back to like the shared values or like-minded individuals, of finding out what brings you to Bitcoin is always like a fun story. And it's, a bit of a cliche of a question, but when you're at a meetup and you meet somebody for the first time, it's like, hey, what's up? How are you? It's not just like, oh, what do you do for work? It's, so how'd you get into Bitcoin?
Mhm.
And then people will go into their stories. And I think it was something that you said that was interesting was like your friend who explained it to you, and whether or not he was a quote unquote OG. I don't know if that necessarily matters, but one of the really good delineations that I heard somebody start to use for like Bitcoiners, because I'm not a fan of like, class of 20 whatever, or cycle, whatever. He was basically saying it's pre-ETF and post-ETF. And there's like a clear delineation of like, you can tell who's a Bitcoiner pre-ETF. They're probably a little bit more on the like, not your keys, not your coins, like hard line. Sats is the standard type of person versus some potential paper Bitcoiners. But
yeah, my buddy's all in iBit right now. I've been working hard to try to get him.
But it's a good way to get in the door. And like, I mean, it's just so interesting. It's all about the environment that you put yourself in. So whether you're on Bitcoin Twitter, whether you're on Nostr, whether you're in Austin, Nashville, Vancouver, like that is going to play such a unique and distinguished role in how you see Bitcoin, because it's a global thing, but then people are learning about it locally. And that's like, from a grassroots adoption perspective, that's what I'm so bullish about, is like, there's so many unique perspectives. I mean, I was sharing this story earlier today of the CTV activation. Did I tell you about this?
We talked about it briefly in Nashville.
Okay, so yeah. So see, there was a letter that came out about starting the conversation of how to activate CTV. Now, for our listeners, and most of our listeners are probably not technical. I'm not technical either. So I don't even really know what CTV is. What does it stand for? Like check something?
Yeah, I can tell you.
Something. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know. But there was basically a letter that came out that said we should talk about how to integrate this or soft fork this into the Bitcoin code. I was at Nash BitDevs now 2 months ago, and this came up, and it was basically like, yeah, this letter came out. I signed on to it. Any questions? Nope. Okay, next topic. A week later, I'm back here in Austin for our BitDevs, and it comes up and it's like, yeah, this letter came out. We put our name on it, and it was fireworks. People were like throwing arrows, and like, it was like, you don't even know what you signed on to, and why do we need this? And then other people were like, well, this is just bike shedding because everybody thinks they understand it, but they don't actually understand it. And like all of these just back and forth, where I was sitting there as just a bystander being like, we talked about this last week and there was no contention whatsoever. This week here, I'm like, damn, I need to think about this in an entirely different way. And on the reverse of that, and from just like comparing apples and oranges to Austin and Nashville, is like the knots versus core debate. Those conversations at Austin BitDevs were actually very civil. Like, it was like, yeah, you can kind of do what you want. It's a decentralized protocol, like, power to the nodes, whatever. And in Nashville, the conversation was very different.
Anti-knots.
Or I don't even fully remember. There was just a lot more concern about what it would do to the protocol and how it would impact like Bitcoin going forward. Now, I'm not going to pretend to have an opinion on either of those because it's way too technical in the weeds. Like, at the end of the day, I think you should have the right to run your own node. Like, that's kind of it. And whatever that means, wherever that falls, the network will decide, the free market will decide. But the reason why I'm sharing that is because like those are two cities that are seen as the Bitcoin capital of like the world, and just two vastly different takes on two pretty big topics that have been in Bitcoin in the last few months. And then when you, like I said, when you go on Twitter, it's super hostile. When you go on Nostr, it feels like an echo chamber. When you're on LinkedIn, it's like nobody even on LinkedIn talks about Twitter. That's why I'm so bullish on LinkedIn. Bitcoin? Yeah, I'm so bullish on LinkedIn, and it's just like people don't get it. But I think that whether I meant to do that or not, that actually segues really nicely into what you're working on now. And social media and real life versus our algorithms, and what you're working on with feed filter and your latest release. And I'm just gonna like shut up for a second because that was a bit of a soliloquy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does. Right? I mean, like what you're talking about here is, so let's say you're a bystander, the first, I don't know, dozen bit devs I went to, I was just sitting in the way back, super quiet, just listening, just kind of soaking it all in, Googling a whole bunch of terms and learning. And, so people are very susceptible, or it's just the nature of, you're going to learn what you're exposed to. Now, I believe that people think for themselves and that, we all have our own intentions and our goals, but you can't help the fact that, if you see something more often than something else, it's going to be a part of your mind and you might form certain opinions around that. And so, of course, social media is the big example of this. So if you are on, Twitter and Bitcoin is banned, you can't talk about Bitcoin, you can't talk about certain political opinions, or there's certain facts like around COVID was a big example of this, where it's just totally hidden or it's changed in a certain way, then, that's going to shape your opinions, or it's just going to make you really pissed off, right? Because you're going to ask like, why am I never seeing this stuff? It actually is very isolating, I think, for people. So when COVID was happening, in addition to becoming a total laser-eyed maxi, I was also very unhappy with my sort of corporate day-to-day job. And I felt like I was just burning a lot of time on social media. And I clocked myself, I think it was 5 hours a day. It was really bad. And a lot of that was YouTube and learning about Bitcoin. So you could say that's kind of productive. Yeah. But it's mostly just wasting time, getting sucked down doom scrolling, and getting like increasingly politically radicalized because I was just doom scrolling all day long. We all do it, right? I still doom scroll even today. But at the time, I really viewed Bitcoin as an escape hatch out of kind of corporate life and into entrepreneurship. But later, since I've kind of gained a little bit of a safety net from being kind of, it's weird to say you're early to Bitcoin when it's only a few years, but early to Bitcoin, that's allowed me to say, okay, now I can take an entrepreneurial risk. What's a big problem I want to solve? And what I'm really passionate about is helping people like myself, back during COVID, unlock themselves, kind of unchain themselves from the tether that they might be attached to. And I think our phones are one of the biggest tethers that we're currently attached to. The algorithms that these social medias create, we all know this is the case. They are optimized for engagement metrics, meaning they are pushing the content that's going to get you hooked, not the content that's true, not the content that is most aligned with your conscious goals. It's like the content that's most aligned with your subconscious, instincts.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it was Naval talking on a Joe Rogan podcast where he was basically like, when you look at he was like, the most powerful people in the world today are not in governments. They're in white lab coats working for the social media sites. And he was saying that back in like 2016, 2017. Because he was talking about, there was the Arab Spring, and then there was all the Facebook stuff that happened during the 2016 election, and just how people started to leverage social media in a way that we've never seen as a society. Yeah. Because it is like dopamine hit after dopamine hit. You just have super bright lights in your 2 inches from your face while you're trying to sleep, just radicalizing you, giving you everything that's true, false, and in between.
I find myself sometimes like, luckily I'm not as bad about it nowadays, but I used to find myself like just so angry at 2 a.m. or just laughing out loud, like fully awake at 2 a.m. because of some crap I'm looking at on Twitter.
I mean, I remember now I'm much better at actually sleeping with the phone outside of my bedroom. But I remember there was a time period where I thought I couldn't fall asleep if I didn't like basically make my eyeballs bleed from looking at my screen. Yeah. Because like now I realize that I just was using that as a distraction from all sorts of other things. But yeah, phone addiction is real bad. And like you even saying 5 hours a day, like for me, I went through a phase where I was trying to really cut down screen time. So like I was trying to get like max 2 hours a day, which is still kind of a lot, low key. And like, it's hard. It's also hard when you think of it from like, okay, I'm awake for, let's say 16 hours in a day. I'm awake for 16 hours and I'm spending 7 hours of that time just on my phone or my computer.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
Like I'm spending almost 50% of my time on the phone. That's insane.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the whole goal, is that not only are you exposed to your phone, that's bad enough from a dopamine, your eyeballs, your brain, but it's the algorithm is giving you information that is curated in a certain way. And that is, for me at least, this was holding me back from the bigger goals I had. And like I tell this when I'm describing what I'm building currently, I tell people my feed, and this is specifically Twitter, but it's kind of true in general, my feed was comprised of 80%, 90% is three things: politics, violence, and cute puppies.
Yeah, just like a little like palate cleanser between
Maybe, I don't know.
between
Because the truth
like
is,
making you as angry or sad as possible. Just a little palate cleanser where you're like, okay, like
I
I
don't
can
like
keep
any
going.
of those things. During the election, I blocked Trump, I blocked Harris, I blocked every political, I even blocked Bitcoin. I blocked everything I could think of using the mute words. I tried all these different tools. I blocked the whole feed. I deleted my Twitter. You know, and I keep using all these different tools to try to block this out because what are my real interests? Technology and business. I don't care about puppies. They are cute. I'll see a puppy every now and then, but I don't want to see it all the time. Obviously, I don't want to be seeing violence in my feed and politics unless it's like a major thing that happens once a quarter. I kind of want to find out if, you know, World War III is about to start, but I then don't want to spend the next, 2 weeks doom scrolling on World War III. So that's where the idea of feed filter really came from, because I said, look, this tool, social media, is valuable. It's, I've tried to just block it out, delete it. But when you do that, you are cutting yourself off from something that is valuable and does keep you informed. I remember I was on a plane and I was just scrolling through Twitter and I stumbled upon a post that said the FinCEN, financial, whatever CEN stands for, financial
censorship,
government,
probably.
some financial
Basically.
group what they were basically going to do, FinCEN, was force every person who ever started an LLC to file their social security number in some database with the government that I guarantee you would be hacked within 30 days, and do it once per LLC you filed. And if you didn't do that, you could get up to a $10,000 fine per business or up to 6 months in jail. And I had filed at least 5 LLCs, probably more that I've forgotten about. And so I basically couldn't even adhere to this law if I wanted to. And if you're about to get a bill of, 50 grand or God knows how many years in prison, then you probably want to know about that information. I found out about that in Twitter. I didn't get an email. I didn't get a letter in the mail. Nobody told me this in real life. This was Twitter information. So that's why people use social media, because usually it's more like, staying up to date with your friends or checking on the news. It's more trivial things, but every now and then there is something extremely important and it's useful to have that there. But the cost is this massive addiction and exposed to the curated algorithm. So what feed filter tries to do is it says, look, okay, if you're going to go into this war zone that is social media to try to get your information, let's make sure A, it's the information that you're actually after consciously, not subconsciously, and B, that you're able to get in there and get out, and you're not going to get stuck in kind of a black hole.
So tell me how it works. Feed filter is a Chrome extension that you add to your Chrome browser, and it will basically filter, for lack of a better term, it'll filter my feed, show me what I quote unquote should or need to see, and it won't show me any of the garbage that is, I mean, if you had to estimate, it doesn't have to be a scientific like answer. 80% of the internet is garbage.
Well, at least that. I mean, dead internet theory might say it's 99, but I cap it at 80% right now.
Okay, so tell me how it works.
Yeah.
How do you filter out that 80% garbage?
The most important thing is feed filter is an algorithm that you control. It's not me imposing my view of what is or isn't good for you to see. Now, I do have default settings in feed filter, so that when you show up on your feed, the default settings are it's filtering out, like clickbait and tribal hostility, stuff like that. But the user can go in and change all those settings. And what it's doing behind the scenes is that each post that appears in your feed, before your eyeball even sees that post, it's running through some AIs I have running here in Austin, also in Boston on some servers, and then also ChatGPT to basically say, does this post the user is about to see meet their threshold criteria for the information that they want to get out of social media? And the key thing there is that you consciously wrote down this description, these filter instructions. And because you consciously wrote that down, that's like the front of your brain thinking, not the back of your brain. So that when it's, late at night, you're back home from work, you're tired, and you're scrolling, you're really just scrolling to pass the time, entertainment, but your conscious instructions that you put there ahead of time, those are in place. You can turn feed filter off and go back to the feed that you had before, but at least it allows you to go on social media, have that experience, but without the addiction, without the garbage that you'd normally be seeing.
That's great. And one of the reasons why I like that, because it's a very different approach, right? Like you have all of these tools that pop up of how to limit your screen time. There's a tool that's built into the iPhone that you can easily just kind of, click and 15 more minutes. And like, I find myself doing that a lot. There's a app that I use called 1sec, where every time I open Instagram, it triggers a shortcut to open this 1sec app, and it like prompts you to like take a breath, and it's like, are you sure you want to open this? Like, just I even found like that slight barrier has cut down a lot of my time on Instagram, but I still use it. It's still like, yeah, I do want to use it. I do want to doom scroll or whatever. I want to check notifications. But where your approach is very different is I get to choose what I find productive. So screen time doesn't really matter, because to your point, when you were, learning about Bitcoin and COVID, you might have had 10 hours of screen time a day. Think about Andreas, like him talking about his Bitcoin story, where he was just like losing weight because he was reading and learning so much about Bitcoin. But like, would that quote unquote high screen time be unproductive or bad for Andreas? I would say probably not, considering how many Bitcoiners he onboarded and just like the lore of Andreas Antonopoulos. And I've can convert that to my own productivity as well, where like if I'm working on some type of graphic or some type of research report or writing some type of article / newsletter, whatever it may be, I don't step away from that session online saying, whoa, that was way too much screen time. I step away saying, that was really productive. I wasn't distracted. I was focused. And I really like how that's probably Alex Hormozy talking about hustle culture, but Hormozy, he does a really good job of, he equates focus. He views it as like a type of whatever, I guess it's almost like the opposite of addiction, but it doesn't mean that it's easy to ignore. He basically says that, like addiction, focus is something that you have to choose every day. Discipline is something that you have to choose every day. Like, I can very easily just not focus and doom scroll and all that type of stuff, or I can choose to focus, and my screen time might be the exact same. It might be 7 hours a day on both, but the difference in output is wildly different. So that's where I really like that approach. And I guess where I think that would be really valuable is for people who, which is kind of everybody, but people who need to be online, and they need to be like, some people are like, oh, I want to get off Twitter, but I can't. And like,
that's my job.
That's my job. That's how you market. Like that's where Bitcoiners are in a lot of instances. So I guess kind of riffing off that a little bit is like, how have you started to think about feed filter, of going back to like the product market fit and who your customer is? Like, how do you communicate that out to people who will be, yearning for this product, in my opinion, and reach them, and then also convince them that your product is better than any of the just screen time limiters that are on the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think like one thing that stands out to me is that one of the lessons that I've learned when trying to be ambitious and achieve great things is that I need to be realistic about my own ability to be decisive and focused and motivated in the future. So I spend a lot of effort in environment optimization. I mean, you probably do too, because here we are sitting in Bitcoin Commons. So we've both made the decision to come to Austin or Nashville, other places, and immerse yourself in Bitcoin culture. Like, my environment at home is very optimized. My gym is basically in my bedroom. So that first thing I do when I get up is lift some weights, pick up something heavy. So I just try to make it as easy as possible to do the productive things that will get me closer to my goals, right? Now, a lot of people some people are motivated enough that or intrinsically motivated to achieve a goal, that they don't need crutches like a feed filter type tool. They can keep themselves off doom scrolling. They can, take action. They can consume content, move on. But I mean, look at TikTok. TikTok is like the most addictive thing you could possibly imagine. And so we're surrounded by these tools that they've got whole teams of psychologists who are trying to carefully tune this so that it keeps you hooked for as long as possible. So that's your competition. Those are the lab coats you were talking about earlier. So the way I think about this is, who's the user? The user is someone whose ambitions are higher than their subconscious desires, which is kind of everyone to some degree, but some people have a different gap, right? So if you are busy, you've got goals. I'm trying to do a startup is big for me, trying to learn about Bitcoin, do things like that. But at the same time, I like watching cute puppies. Like, we all do to various degrees. But my subconscious was always winning. And, you can read all these different people, all these different techniques you can do. You can meditate, you can take the break off the app. I've done that too. for me, it wasn't working. It wasn't enough. I was not exerting the discipline required to come over that. That's why I ultimately deleted Twitter, and I have feed blocking tools. But, I came back around. So I think that users who are, maybe it's not all people, maybe it's 1 in 10 people, maybe it's half of people, something like that, are on social media and they want to continue to be on social media, but they just don't want to be spending 5-7 hours a day, maybe 2-3 hours a day, or they're still on there, but the type of information they're getting is more tailored towards their long-term, goals. So that's the high level archetype of the type of person. I think it probably is more people who are, like kind of busy professionals, who have, I don't know if it's high income or not, but it's, high, again, like aspiration. I feel like that is probably more the type of people who would benefit from a tool like this. I have a friend of mine who's a really good friend of mine. And it was funny because his feed, I was testing out Feed Filter with him, and his feed was the worst feed I've ever seen. It was pure like brain rot. It was just like, and it was funny too. Like he's all kinds of AI generated.
My Instagram gives me a decent amount of brain rot, and like I hate myself for watching it, but it's, sometimes you got to tip your cap where you're like, that is so bad that it's good.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's like, come on, you can do something better with your time. Like every now and then you can have that. But
I got the brain rot that my Instagram has been feeding me recently is SpongeBob AI like cover band songs. So it'll be a SpongeBob character singing like a grunge music, like Pearl Jam on stage just for no reason. And
yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. And then I watch it and I'm like, God damn it, it got me again.
Yeah. That's the crazy thing. It's like you catch yourself. I get this on YouTube all the time. And like a lot of times it's like learning rabbit holes, but I'll be like learning about the history of the Ottoman Empire. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting, but also how the hell did I end up here? I was trying to learn about React Native, and somehow I'm here in the Ottoman Empire. Like, where's the paper
trail? It's like a fever dream,
right? But when you get on the YouTube feed, like you have all these different, boxes that show up. But imagine if all the boxes that were deemed clickbait, like one of the things that Feed Filter, it doesn't do now, but it will do in the future, is it'll pre-watch all the videos for you by basically downloading the transcript and kind of quickly going through the video to understand roughly what the content is. And then check that content against, again, your filter criteria, your interests, to see if it deserves your attention. And I think as the internet kind of devolves into more and more brain rot, I mean, you're going to have like just algorithmic users on an algorithmic feed who are like spawning themselves. There's like an infinite number of AI generated car videos now on YouTube.
Animals doing the free dives into the pools.
Have you seen that one?
Oh, it's like so bad. There's also the Yeti vlog, the Yeti vlogger. Have you seen that?
I also have not seen that.
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a Yeti, or like an abominable snowman who's a vlogger. It's so. Here's where I will say it's credible and good to see. And this is a lot of cope here and a lot of like reverse, like me just trying to speak through how bad my feed
is
right
become. There with you, man.
Is like see how far AI is progressing when I'm like, okay, how can I actually like incorporate that into my work where I can make something valuable? Yeah. Like, how can I create an AI commercial or an AI video that like can be used for promotion in the future? And like, there are people that are doing that. I know people that are working on that in a really like high impact, high value way. But then you have people who are doing it for just fun and making some, you got to give them credit where it's due.
It's
like
good. It's entertaining.
I had a tweet the other day where I was like, I don't associate with bears, talking specifically about vibes. Like, I don't know. I mean, if you're bearish on Bitcoin, like that probably just means that you're bad vibes anyways. But like I was talking specifically about vibes. And then somebody replied, well, what about the animal bears? And that's where I was like, there's got to be some AI like vlog of that Yeti that I was talking about, just hanging out with a bear. And it was a like 10-minute video of him basically walking in the woods and ended up wrestling a bear. And it was like, it was so bad that it was good, but it was also like, wow, this is insane, because it follows the story of how all these vloggers like operate today. And like, I know that's a huge tangent, but I think where it is a struggle, and something that you just said of like, the algorithm is working to capture your attention, but then there's the other side of that supply curve of users who are creating this quote unquote entertainment, but at the end of the day, like probably brain rot or just not really valuable content, where they're hacking the algorithm and it's
Right.
having a real negative impact on people. So like,
Yeah.
how do you balance or fight through that piece when looking at feed filter of yes, you have the algorithm, but then you also have people who are gamifying the algorithm, and then it's a constant push and pull of what's working and what's changing and what's being provided.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why you have one blanket filter. So you show up to this fight and you're totally today outmatched because you've got algorithmic producers of brain rot using algorithmic feed, and they're on one side. And then you got you on the other side as the consumer. Like, for example, you could be both a producer and a consumer of content like this. As a consumer, you need to show up with that shield. And I think over time, that's going to be more and more important. You're not going to be able to get anything from the internet if you don't have that shield to begin with. So yeah, basically I'm just kind of like looking at the system of exactly how the social media technology works, not just in a browser, also on mobile, but how it serves up content that ends up on your screen. Like, what are all the technical things that are happening behind the scenes? Where's the leverage? And how do I maximize leverage to the user and minimize leverage to the other person? And because you are the owner of your own eyeballs and the browser is running on your hardware, you have all the leverage in that system. Now they have the content, they have, they still have the information you're looking for, but the vast majority of the leverage from a theoretical standpoint is on your side. But from a practical standpoint, in terms of what solutions are out there, most of the solutions are on their side, meaning they have the algorithms, the teams of people. They have now people have low cost ways to generate AI content.
Oh yeah.
But basically my view on this is, screw the producers. You want to go, and I might produce an AI generated content and say, look how bad this brain rot is. If you never want to see brain rot like this again, then try feed filter. So I might produce it too, but
yeah.
But I want all the leverage to be on the consumer side. This is a consumer-oriented application, and I kind of view it as like a battle. You just want to give this person the best tool to help them navigate this increasingly like hostile world.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. And it's like you said, it's a tool. Some people look at a hammer and they build a house. Some people look at a hammer and you have the Homer Simpson meme where you hit your thumb. So like at the end of the day, like people have the agency to do with it what they will. But what I really like about your project is like I can say I am optimizing for, let's just say, Bitcoin treasury companies right now. I want to know what's going on with the, quote unquote analytics of MNAV and all the yield that these businesses are producing per share. And that's what I want to focus on. And I can go on Bitcoin Twitter and find some of those things, but there's also a lot of noise. And, then maybe in a month from now, I'm like, you know what, I'm done with that. I think it's kind of a hype train that maybe I just got tired of. Now I'm really interested in mining. I want to learn about mining, and I can tailor my feed to tell me what's going on in mining. And there's probably ways, I'm sure, to do two things at once and just have it be Bitcoin focused or whatever. But it's like, when we go through these seasons of either building or marketing or, studying or whatever it may be, then this could be a really valuable, tool to help progress that. I mean, I think a lot of times the term like creativity loves constraints gets thrown around. And I used to think of that as like a kind of the opposite way of how I think about it now, where now when I think about it, I'm like, okay, like I'm in this sandbox and there's so much that can be done, versus before what I thought about, how I thought about it was like, I have a problem, so I need to solve it. That's my constraint. Yeah. But now it's, how do I set up a system where I can remain focused to solve that problem?
Yeah. And it's interesting because like when you're always focused, you're always on, we're human beings. We like to sing and dance. Like we like to have fun. So I think that is the flip side of all this, which is, sometimes I try to over optimize. I try to like squeeze every last minute out of the day. And, from a piece of paper perspective, that makes a lot of sense, but you still have to have enjoyment. But like, is consuming brain rot like really that much enjoyment? I mean, yeah, it makes you chuckle in the moment. You can tell someone about the funny orangutan driving around, but like, wouldn't it be more amazing to run your own podcast and talk to someone on a couch in Austin, Texas, in the nexus of Bitcoin? I mean, there's so many bigger things that we can be achieving and accomplishing that can be entertaining and colorful and allow us to live our fullest lives. We just shouldn't be held back by this like really easy stuff. And one of the things I did on Feed Filter was I made a real easy toggle. So you just toggle it off. A lot of people have asked for, an evening mode, so you can go back to the entertainment. You can still get the brain rot.
Yeah.
And look, other people have said, hey, what if I take your filter instructions? And I say, don't give me anything educational, quantitative, analytical, and just give me pure jokes and memes. And you know what? If you want to do that, that's fine. But I don't think you're going to be starting much of a business or doing anything important if you live like that for too long. Maybe you become a good comedian. That's possible. So like there's probably pathways for that. But a lot of people, they get stuck in this world, this loop. They go to, this is me, go to work, come back, watch funny videos. Then I'm tired, go to work the next day. And my goals are just sitting there. And all of a sudden time goes by. It's like, oh my God, that was a year right there. And where did all that time go? That's really what Feed Filter is trying to help with. Make it easier, lower the barrier for you to have the energy and the information you need to go after those bigger dreams you might have.
No, that's great. Yeah. And like you said, to each their own. Like, at the end of the day, like you have the ability to use your feed or your tools whichever way you want, which is also a cool aspect of it, because I'm sure there will be some use cases that somebody's using it where you're like, wait, they're doing what? And then they found this through that. Like that's going to be an insane case study someday.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure. But I mean, and to your point, like sometimes turning the brain off like is important. Like rest is not weakness, even though in the productivity world and in the optimization world, sometimes it can come across that way. I mean, ironically, or I don't know if it's ironic, but one of the ways that I actually found a good sense to turn my brain off, because I found that I was like watching TV, like, name any show. And when it was live action, I would always be looking for like plot holes and be like, oh, that's not realistic, or that doesn't make sense, or like that was, not good writing. So over the last like year, 6 months more so, I've gotten really into like just watching anime, because that has been so disconnected from reality, where I don't have like, what am I going to say that, Hunter Sung and Solo Leveling, like that was unrealistic? Like obviously it was an anime, like it's a fake show. But when it's live action, I just found myself like harder to like disconnect that reality. Whereas anime, you have the colors and crazy animations and fights and storylines. So that was a good way to like turn it off. And I think that's so opposite from Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is always like, yeah, it's tethered to, proof of work is tethered to real exerted energy in the physical world. And like, you have to constantly go back and forth of like, what is real and what is fake. And that becomes exhausting in itself. So if you can just put up some guardrails or some type of filter to like at least have you stay on somewhat of the path, then you should be able to like hold that steering wheel a little bit firmer and a little bit more confident in what your goals are. But to your point, it's not like it's not like a silver bullet that's gonna that's gonna like solve everything. But I don't even think that's your intent.
No, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's just making it easier to stay on mission, just like Bitcoin. I mean, you think about, there's a lot of aspects of Bitcoin that have come out of science fiction. I mean, think about Ayn Rand, Gulch. What we've created is a Gulch in cyberspace. And that is, there's actually like, some could argue there's kind of logical holes in objectivism. And there's, objectivism and Austrian economics are not perfectly coherent. They don't perfectly fit together. They're pretty close. They're definitely complementary. But through the story of Ayn Rand and other inspiration, I think there was some inspiration that came before it, kind of the fall of complex societies. It turns out that throughout history, groups that are feeling persecuted by their governments will always kind of flee to the higher ground or to some sort of kind of sheltered area. And there's lots of examples of this in history. I mean, the Pilgrims being one. And so like that dream, that sort of fiction ended up creating something real. So there's a lot of value in pursuing those stories.
And I love that you brought up objectivism. Can you explain what objectivism means to you, and like what, I guess, the philosophy that Ayn Rand, which is pretty prevalent in the Bitcoin space, but not that prevalent in other areas of our culture, means to you?
I don't know if I can do it justice, but my understanding of objectivism is that it imposes some sort of moral constraint on what is right and wrong. And it's about always acting in your own self-interest. And I believe it ties morality to that. And so I don't think I can give a great definition of objectivism, but I know that it differs from Austrian economics. There's a great lineage chart that I found. I don't know if I could tell you the YouTuber who created it, but I saw this great breakdown of the lineage of different philosophies. And one of the interesting things about Bitcoin, I find, is that I do think it's breaking fresh ground in terms of, I guess you could call it political philosophies or philosophies of how to live. And it's drawing from both Austrian economics and objectivism, which are distinct branches of thought. Now, one of the things that might be, this needs to be figured out in the future is that a lot of Austrian economics, kind of dovetails into libertarianism, which has this sort of idea of you are not going to harm another individual. You're not going to take from them against their will. And that is a bit of morality in there. But today we see a lot of corporations. I mean, you could say shitcoins do this, maybe the ETFs to some degree. They are just saying, look, there's dollars there. We're going to take the dollars. And there's a little bit of a Darwinian aspect of that where it's like, well, if you take morality out of the equation, then you get this kind of crazy corporatocracy that just takes over everything. I think I find Bitcoin's philosophy very interesting because it's kind of breaking that fresh ground, and it's maybe represents a distinct, like a new branch of thought that is an evolution. It's not just based in Austrian economics and based in objectivism. I actually think it might be a evolution, and maybe in there somewhere, people smarter than I can figure out how to kind of unify objectivism, Austrian economics, and the maybe moral tenets that neither really have, fully flushed out.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, definitely read Ayn Rand. Like, that's seeing what's going on in the world today and having Atlas Shrugged as like a backdrop of just like being like, oh yeah, like that makes sense from why this is happening. Or, you have the looters and you have those who are productive in society. And I think, like I said, in a world of inaction, a lot of Bitcoiners are willing to take action and willing to take risks. And it's funny because a lot of Bitcoiners that I talk to, yeah, they'll take risks on like a business venture or something that they're looking to do, but none of them ever view saving in Bitcoin and being in Bitcoin as the risk, which is
right.
It's not hilarious, but
it's risk off.
It's risk off. It's like when I have to talk to normies about why I think they should start saving in Bitcoin and start studying Bitcoin, I always have to say to them, I understand I'm farther on the risk curve than you, but I hope you understand that I don't view myself like that on the risk curve.
You say you are objectively wrong.
No, I don't want to say it like that because I my way of orange pilling is I try to be as approachable.
No, me too. At first, but I feel like over time it becomes harder to play nice.
100%. I mean, back to the story that I was talking about at the top of this. Like, I've been telling people, every year at when football season starts to ramp back up and some of those old group chats get dusted off for fantasy football, the commissioner will always be like, if you have any rule proposals, like say them now and I'll make a poll. And like, it's the most disorganized thing ever. I'm pretty sure every guy's group chat can sympathize with this. And every year in my fantasy football group chats, I say annual proposal to hold our league pot in Bitcoin. And this was the first year that there actually seems like there's some interest in it.
Wow.
And like, that kind of sucks for me because it means I'm signing up to hold on to everybody else's probably Bitcoin. And like, I'm going to be the guy that, I need to be the league treasurer in a league that
cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool title, I guess, add it to the resume. But like, I was like, yeah, if there could be like some, just like multi-sig service that you can put it in like a public vault and it kind of just obfuscates the responsibility from somebody having to be technically savvy to do it, specifically for like fantasy sports or like group, like, things like that. I think that'd be killer.
Froster, probably. I couldn't explain how. But
we'll have to get Austin here to explain it because, Froster goes over my head. But all that to say is like people are going to be working on their own timelines. People are going to get attracted to the price. People are going to have to study it themselves. And ultimately, Bitcoin will win out because Bitcoin is simple. It just works. It's 21 million every 10 minutes, new block. It just works.
TikTok.
But like, and I think we can start to like wrap up a little bit. But what I love about this conversation and the foundation of Bitcoin, plus this reality of having to quote unquote live online, is the low time preference that Bitcoin provides.
Yeah.
And that low time preference, both in terms of like runway for how to actually sustain a business, but also how to think about complex problems. Because when you are thinking about what you actually want to have as your impact in a business perspective and in the broader like universe perspective, I think that that's really cool of tackling a challenge that I would love to hear your conversations of like people who have dealt with like phone addiction and doom scrolling and all that type of stuff. Cause I'm sure you've heard endless case studies or user stories of like somebody being like, yeah, I was trying to do this and I just was scrolling for 5 hours. I mean, me too.
Right. Or deleting the apps and just being completely, like a friend of mine told me he didn't find out about the election until several days later.
Legend.
And yeah, that is kind of a legend. Like, I'm very impressed by that. But, at the same time, it's like, what happens if, somebody nukes your home city? I mean, like, hopefully, you get a text message about it. And that's an extreme case. But people go to extremes and like one of my friends was telling me the story about all the different ways, and I've been through there too, all the different tools and hacks that he's tried to make to constrain him. And this guy is like one of the most creative, innovative people I know. He's always creating music and creating different startups. And he's into software. He's a game developer right now. Really cool guy.
Dope.
And his phone is on black and white. He's like has 5 different types of extensions that are blocking different aspects of his feed. I use 2 different extensions just to block my YouTube, one for shorts and one for the feed. Struggle. And I think underlying it is a bit of kind of confidence erosion, because you say, and I knew this was for me definitely the case, where I would have these big dreams and I would say, I cannot get myself to make meaningful progress towards this goal. I'll spend 1 hour working on the startup and 5 hours doom scrolling.
Yep.
And I look at that day in, day out, and I say, do I even deserve to have these dreams? What's wrong with me? What's the issue? And that's like that's a terrible feeling. And I think honestly, a lot of people have that just with our monetary system in general, where they're like, look, I'm doing everything right. I'm working hard. Maybe I took on 2 jobs. I'm not eating out, yada, yada. And yet still I'm not getting ahead, and I'm trying to buy this house and the house is getting more expensive faster than I'm saving up to catch up to the house. What is wrong with me? And you kind of look around, you're like, wait a second, everyone else has this problem too, or a lot of people do. So maybe something isn't wrong with me. That's where it kind of turns into either despair or anger. Or
back to
Ayn
Rand, like I think one of the biggest issues that we have going on right now is apathy. And the story of Atlas Shrugged is a story of apathy and how society crumbles when that kind of virus takes over the general population. And like, 100% what you were saying. Like when you have a goal or even just like a simple to-do for a day and you want to procrastinate, like, sometimes people procrastinate by like cleaning their apartment because like they say that's quote unquote productive, but it's not actually what's productive. Yep. The most common way to procrastinate is to just open Instagram or open Twitter. And like I've started to find myself doing that in so many different instances where I'll like get like, I'll reward myself for a slight, like 5% move towards that goal, right? Like if you think of it like a progress bar, like even something as simple as trying to read a book, it's gotten to the point where like, okay, I finished this section of the chapter. Now I'm going to catch up on Twitter, finish this chapter, 30-minute break, going to scroll on my phone. And it's like, wait, like, but I want to finish this book and I have the time to finish the book, but I'm just unable to do it for really no reason at all other than that subconscious that you were referring to of like, this book isn't fulfilling that dopamine that I'm looking for right now. And that's where the high time preference really conflicts with the low time preference of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and people make it a moral failing. Like, but if you say, look, this person's working hard, they're doing everything right, and they're still not saving up, well, a lot of people say work harder. You're just not sacrificing enough, and that is true. Like it's not necessarily moral failing, but it's like you could do better. Everyone knows that we all could do better. That's always true. But at the same time, when you're in a system that's not engineered for success, then, well, that's going to hold you back too, and to different degrees. I think social media is a case where it's definitely engineered explicitly to keep you right there scrolling for as long as you possibly can. And same with our financial system too. Like it's, it's engineered to keep you working, and the government will keep sucking the money out and spending that on God knows what. And it just kind of makes the whole world crumble. And, you can work hard, you can break out, but that person who does that is like less than 1% person. So you need to have everything go right. And even then, they're not making it to the degree that person deserves. That person deserves everything. I mean, if you can break out of our current system, Bitcoin is just a cheat code. It's just a easy hack that makes it a little bit easier. It's like the escalator that you're on to get to, the world that frankly you deserve. The most conducive environment to help you save for the future and achieve your goals.
I mean, yeah, that fires me up. Fix the money, fix the world.
That's right.
Filter the feed.
Filter all
be
the
more
feeds.
Productive. Like, that's great. I mean, so Ted, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, and this was a great back and forth. Where can people find you? Where can we send them? And what are some things that you're looking forward to and want people to check out going forward?
Like I said, I'm always learning. So what I'm most looking forward to right now is just getting people to test out Feed Filter. It's kind of in a beta mode right now. It works for Twitter and Instagram on Chrome via an extension. You go to feedfilter. There's one big button. You click add to Chrome. It logs right in, has a feedback survey. You can also reach me personally either on X at Ted Thayer, THAYER_, or just email me, ted@feedfilter.com, or come to Austin. I'm usually working out at Pleb Lab, so happy to chat anytime. I just like the opportunity to talk to other Bitcoiners, talk to people who are struggling with these types of problems and see how we can solve it.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And yeah, find a Bitcoin meetup, meet interesting people like Ted. There's going to be people that are building really cool shit, and it fires me up every time. I've been saying all week we're at all-time high in prices, but I'm also an all-time high in vibes because Bitcoiners just continue to raise the bar. Ted, thank you so much.
Great to
really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll be back next week.